Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to start by apologizing for missing the last meeting unexpectedly and without any warning or explanation. And I don't have one. I just forgot about it. We are going to go get started, and I would like now to call to order the February 19th meeting of the Downtown Design Review Board. Will the board and ex officio members please introduce themselves? Start with you, Cameron.
Cameron Bolin, AIA representative.
Matthew DeBard-Laban, Downtown Knoxville Alliance.
Rick Blackburn, Historic Zoning Commission.
Perry Childress, East Tennessee Community Design Center.
Laura Wen, Downtown Resident Representative.
Jared Worsham, Downtown Resident Representative.
Suzanne Taravella, Neighborhood Representative.
Mike Reynolds, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Josh Wright, Urban Design Representative.
Tony Allen, Downtown Development and Business Representative.
Melinda Woolert, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Dallas DeArmond, Knoxville, Knox County Planning. And I will also say that we have Christina McGraw-Tillery on Zoom for the City Law Department.
Mark Reel, Plans Review and Inspections.
Great, thanks, everybody. We'll move on to the minutes of the January 15th board meeting. They should be provided with the agenda. Are there any corrections?
No, but I like the new chart, and I move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Moving on, we have Mike Reynolds joining us today, and he is going to give us the staff report.
All right. And I'm happy to be back with y'all. It's been a while. For some of the new board members don't know, I used to staff this board, so it's been several years though. So it's going to be a little rusty, but it'll get through. Okay. The first staff approval was 120 South K Street. It's a projecting sign at 3 feet wide, 1 foot tall. It's just going to be located above the first story of the building. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer. How do I get it there? Oh, I know. Where's that control? Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Okay, thank you. All right. So as I mentioned, this is a level 1 sign. It's just a replacement sign installed on an existing bracket, 3 feet wide, 1 foot tall. The next one is it's an infill housing, 3427 McPherson Street. It's a new secondary structure, a storage shed, 10 feet wide, 12 feet deep, and it's if anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to ask. It's to the rear of the house. And go in the wrong direction. My controls are not working well. Yeah, my computer is not responding at all, of course. Hold on. Yeah, I'm not getting... I apologize. My computer is froze on me. And I don't have the other certificates written down. No.
I think we should just wait, because if we move on, we're going to get into the other projects pretty fast and want to look at them.
Okay, am I still on Zoom? I am?
Yeah.
It's amazing. Okay. We'll do that one. I think this, where I'm having some issues, it's not wanting to, it's kind of locking me up there. Try opening it again. Okay. Here we go. 2812 Fairview Avenue. It's a front porch addition. It's an new entry stoop measuring 6 feet wide, 4 feet deep, centered over the existing door. Has a gabled roof and 6x6 square porch supports, steps accessing from the existing driveway. Okay, that's it for the staff report.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have certificates of appropriateness for downtown. The first project is 207 East Jackson Avenue, which is case number 12B24DT.
All right, I'll try to summarize this pretty quick because it is a big project and we've already been through a workshop, so most people should be familiar with it. This is a proposed new 7-story mixed-use building, 6 stories of residential, above 1 story of commercial uses, and then also a proposed 7-story board form concrete structured parking garage. So it is a mixed-use structure, has the liner use of residential and commercial along Jackson Avenue. It does have garage access to both Jackson Avenue and Morgan Street, which is a side street. There's 2 pedestrian entrances to the ground level retail space on Jackson Avenue, a second retail access to Morgan Street elevation, and residential lobby on Morgan Street as well. The secondary access to the parking garage is to the rear elevation. I don't know why it keeps on going backwards on me. Okay. So the mixed-use massing fronting East Jackson Avenue is clad with brown brick veneer on the 2 stories with one level, or with one section towards Morgan Street on the side, extending to 4 stories with black and white fiber cement siding on the upper stories. Ground level features multiple bays of full-height storefront windows with full-light storefront entry systems and retail spaces. The garage is clad in metal screening, and good try to get to some of the more meat of this project. And so getting to some of the design guideline recommendations, talking about like parking, it talks about consolidating curb cuts and locating driveways near mid-block when necessary to prioritize pedestrian safety. They recommend locating parking garages under structures or providing retail, residential, or other office uses to line the garage. Avoid blank walls. Massing and scale, recommend maintaining a pedestrian scaled environment from block to block, along with dividing buildings into modules. Guidelines encourage incorporating first floor uses that are open to pedestrians and draw in walk-in traffic. And Building materials should relate to the scale, durability, color, texture, predominant building materials in the area. Mechanical equipment should be either in or hidden. Signs, in this case, there's not enough information in this package to approve a sign plan, so they'll have to come back at a later date. And any major modifications will have to come back to the board, as noted on the plans. These are kind of preliminary still. So staff, flip through some of these imagery and we can open it up for discussion, but staff recommendation is the final site plan and parking garage to meet city engineering standards, final elevation drawings to meet relevant standards of the city zoning code, including Article 5.4, and signage to return to DRB as a separate application.
Great, thank you, Mike. Is the applicant present? Can you give us your name and address, please?
Yes, John Halford, address is 1905 Overton Park Avenue, Memphis, Tennessee, 38112.
Great, thank you. And Adam, you go
Adam
ahead.
Conetop, 1025, Knoxville, Tennessee.
Great, thank you. Do you all have anything to add to Mike's comments?
I would first just say, thank you for having us here to present. This project has been in front of the design review board, and we have made some changes through the workshop. We're really excited about this project. I think just based on the description of the requirements, we're hitting on every one of those elements pretty strongly. I think this is going to add a significant value to this area of the Old City. And so we're, of course, happy to answer any questions and or guide you through our design considerations today. So thanks again.
Great, thank you. Adam, do you have anything to add?
No, ma'am.
Great, then we will open it up to conversation from the board.
I'm curious if there's currently on-the-street parking in front of that building right now, even though there's no parking signs there. So it's wide enough for two vehicles, and this rendering is showing that it's not anymore. Is that accurate, or just for illustration?
Correct. Yes, that is accurate. What we are intending to do is follow along with the improvements of East Jackson Avenue, the same improvements that have happened on the west end and are also happening across James White Parkway at the stadium. This sidewalk on the north side of East Jackson, where you see that we've paved where there was street parking there, that is the same strategy that's been employed for the streetscape improvements. So our goal is to go along with that current plan, which is what's reflected here.
My understanding is the city is still developing the streetscape improvement plan, so it may not be exactly as you see here. I don't know what the plan will be, if it'll include parking on both sides or not. At this point, you can just kind of assume that it's for illustrative purposes, because the board doesn't approve public improvements. The board does make recommendations for public improvements. So.
Understood, and we feel the same way. Our drawings are based on the streetscape improvements that have come before this along East Jackson. So we're not, we don't presume to know exactly what the city is doing. We're just assuming that it's going to be similar to the previous improvements.
Thank you. I think wide sidewalks are an improvement because people will be walking from there to the mixed-use stadium.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Could we talk about the Morgan Street elevation? On the ground level, there's a storefront, but in the plan, it's not labeled as a use. What's that near the north of the stair tower going to be used for? Is that leftover retail space?
Yes, it's intended to be retail space. Alternatively, it could be kind of an amenity space for the residential. But our goal is for that to be public facing. So the highest and best use would be retail. If it were anything that was tenant facing, it would be maybe or like an amenity. It could be like a bike shop that was used by the tenants, but also available for the public as a service. So the goal is for it to be public facing. That came in part through some of the comments we received from the workshop to work in more retail along Morgan Street. And as we explored that, we saw that it was not only an option, but worked decently well with our plan. So we made sure to add it into that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think going off of that same conversation, the blank wall of the stair tower coming down, it's listed as, well, two things. First of all, it's listed as board form concrete, but then it says flat. Is this actually going to be board form with like the texture of board form, or is it going to be pan form, just regular blank concrete on that elevation?
Our goal is to actually do a texture overlay on top of that, so like a hand troweled, so that it can be a decent texture on that concrete face on that stair tower. For the design, we thought that because these two building forms are relatively different, having that break visually kind of helps with the overall massing. So I think it's serving that purpose. But in terms of the actual material and finish, we want some texture to it, but otherwise it's going to be a natural concrete color.
Okay. Is there anything about our guidelines that blank wall is not allowed for that expanse?
It talks about not having blank walls, but there's nothing explicit in the guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
The zoning ordinance has some blank wall standards. I'm not sure if this would have.
Yeah, Article 5.5, Table 5.4 does mention all street-facing facades must not contain blank wall areas that exceed 35 feet. So that'd be out of the zoning code.
Okay. Okay, yeah, and that's really what I was posturing towards, was just that blank wall. And I totally understand the massing of it with the materials dying into that common wall. That makes sense. But there is it is the lacking portion of that facade, and it does split up the retail space that wraps that corner. I think that the same, like I know that you all had to come back with the metal facade wrapping the backside of the building too. I think that journey up Morgan is going to start to become that much more important. So that's why we keep focusing even on those ancillary facades, because it will be a public face in a lot of capacity than just the old city. So to clarify, Mark, you're saying that blank facade, because it is over 35 feet, is not meeting a zoning guideline?
That would be correct. And I do want to mention that in the planning comments, the staff comments, it does reference that it needs to comply with Article 5.4, but that should be revised to say Article 5.5 for the DK district.
Makes sense.
And just to clarify, that blank wall is not over 35 feet. Where are you guys measuring the 35 feet dimension?
Yeah, I believe it's a horizontal dimension for the 35 feet, not vertical.
Correct, yes. So it's not 35 feet horizontal. It's the dimension of the stair, which is closer to 20 feet.
Yeah, understood. I think there's still something that could be elevated with that blank wall between just to connect those two retail spaces. It may be the awning from the corner that starts to engage the base of the stair tower in some way, something that just draws that elevation over to be able to. I'm afraid that leftover, it's going to be a leftover retail space along Morgan and not get used as much. So that's something that I'm trying to understand a little bit more. Also, could you all explain the screening material on the garage portion a little bit more, like what it actually would be?
Yeah. So there's a substructure to it that mounts modular screening systems We've talked to some suppliers, manufacturers, including opening up discussions with local metal manufacturers that could pull this off. The goal is those modules would be made out of a handful of different panels, if you will. Some of those being made out of fins, like louvers that could be rotated to create some openness and visual interest along the facade. If you're standing at the corner of Morgan and Jackson, we're creating views, kind of some openness where we think that it is a good texture and pattern on the facade from this vantage point. If you stand over on the opposite side, that starts to change because the direction of the louvers changes based on kind of where you're standing. There are also more simple perforated metal panels that are mixed into that, as well as some leave outs to hit a few requirements that we have. One was visual interest. We also wanted to tie this into what we were doing on the Jackson facing facade on the south, on the upper levels. But also we are needing to meet our requirements to passively ventilate the garage. And so some of that openness is based on those calculations.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. Yeah, you don't want to have to introduce the mechanical ventilation.
Yes, sir.
In it.
I had a couple of comments on the Morgan Street side there. With that space that we're referring to next to the stair tower, but toward on the parking garage part. At one point, I thought I'd heard that was going to be the residential lobby, and I heard it might be a residential amenity like bicycle parking or a shop or something that would serve the residential. Because I noticed on the plan that it does not open to the street at all, that the doors to that space are interior to the parking garage, which when I heard residential service or lobby, I thought, well, that makes that make more sense on that regard. And before it slips my mind, Rick had mentioned too about our parking lot screening, whether it should continue on up to a parapet level so we don't see cars on the roof, realizing when you're standing on the ground looking up, you may not see them. You have to get some distance back since we never really see a building in elevation. But that, I think, is a good point that you might want to continue your parking screening up a little to obscure vehicles parked along the edge on the roof. But anyway, my primary comment was about that corner space down there off of the parking garage.
Yes, sir. So if you were to look at the plan on the ground floor, that retail space, plan north of that, there's a hatched area. It's large. It's about 18 feet or so. That is actually the primary pedestrian exit from the garage. And so we're trying to funnel people to a couple of locations. They can go down the stairs and they can kind of cheat and get out to the intersection more quickly. But because of the grade change along Morgan, it's most efficient for everyone to kind of move without getting to very many steps or the fewest number of steps. And so we're putting people out there. So that actually is not insignificant public entry there at the northeast corner of that, quote unquote retail space. Again, we don't know exactly how it's going to be programmed at this time. It could, be a, public, but also amenity use, but there is public access. If you look just plan north, those are just a few steps that access off to the Morgan Street sidewalk, and then that grade slopes down towards the intersection of Morgan and East Jackson. In terms of the elevation and the height, we'd certainly be open to conversation and input. I think for us, we were mainly looking at that height. Of course, from the ground, and you can see those renderings, you're not going to be able to see the cars, but also we were working on striking a datum. You can see that aligns with some of the score joints in our elevation. So we were pulling from that. That said, if that's something that the design review board feels strongly about, then we can certainly explore pushing that up to screen the, to provide further screening, if that's concerned, or to provide sightline studies to show that there won't be any views to cars parked on the rooftop.
Just going to apologize real quick. My computer is acting up again, so hopefully I'll get it back up in a moment.
I wanted to kind of close the loop on that comment from Perry, I wanted to add, so just to confirm that retail, quote unquote, as you said, is never going to have out-facing doors to the street because the grade change doesn't allow it to have on-grade access. It'll have to have the stair set that's adjacent to it. And judging from the hesitancy when you explain it, it's not going to be retail. It'll be an amenity space for the tenants. I guess really the spirit of it is they're trying to have activity on the street and eyes on the street on those sections and not just long expanses of non-activity. So that's why we keep asking about it. I know I do because of that, because it's going to be no one will want to go to it. It's really just not going to have action on that side. So that's the reason why we keep bringing that up. So just to make that into a question, that face will never have store front doors opening to the exterior.
On this side of the street, the access, the storefront doors opening to the exterior open into a large 20-foot by 20-foot covered area that is accessible immediately off of Morgan. So as long as we're on the same page that it is very publicly accessible from Morgan, then yes. In the actual glazing in those two bays, we don't have storefront, and that's due to the grade along Morgan. But if you just go to that third bay, you can walk in, you're in a 20-foot by 20-foot covered vestibule, just like if you were to go to another retail space and they had an awning or a covering. And then from there, you can walk into that retail space and it's, quite publicly accessible. But I think we're probably saying the same thing. I'm just making sure that we're all understanding the plans.
Right.
And it is a transparent glazing, so the space is visible from the street. It's just the level of activity might be the question.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, we do not know what that level of activity is. We have, and we'll talk about this in the second project here, but have planned 301 East Jackson, and both of these projects do have not insignificant entries off of Morgan. And we're also showing to activate the north side to the extent that that's possible along the rail line as well. So we're very much in the same headspace when we talk about Morgan Street and the experience being something that's going to be pedestrian friendly. We expect that this storefront, whether it's amenity, bike parking, whatever that use is, that it is activated and that it is accessible to the public in no small way. Again, the people parking in this garage, it's a 520 space garage. Quite a number of those people, as they go in and out, or could be crossing over this retail space, as well as anyone going up and down Morgan Street would have immediate access to walk into this space from the public right away.
I have a quick question about the parking garage entrances. Is the one from Morgan Street, is that both an entrance and an exit, or is that just an entrance? So will cars primarily exit on the Jackson side, or what will that be?
They are both entrances and exits.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I wanted to ask about the south elevation. So there's, I appreciate that you have brick masonry. I feel like every review board, we're just asking or begging almost for people to use brick. It always somehow isn't in the project. But I wanted to confirm, so you have brown brick. Is it actual full-depth brick, or is it some sort of thin brick? Or is it, what is the actual
Full
material?
depth.
Full depth?
We're showing and modeling full depth brick.
That's good. The black, well, basically the fiber cement in general is a little concerning, specifically the black fiber cement with the south-facing facade. If I'm not mistaken, that's south-facing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
I mean, obviously, its neighbor across the street might be putting it in shadow, but do you? We're not. I'm not asking this because we have a purview to judge assemblies. I'm asking the question for the longevity of the product. Is this going to be installed on any sort of rain screen or ventilated cavity system to allow its longevity of the fiber cement?
Yes, sir. Our intent is to not only use high quality materials and detailing, including the actual fiber cement product, but also to make sure that that detailing is going to maximize the longevity. And so we would highly recommend that this is installed with a rain screen system.
Okay. And on the white, what is our concern of white not looking white after a few years from dirt and that sort of thing?
Sorry, was that directed at?
It's somewhat rhetorical. I'm afraid that it's going to not hold up that well just over time in dirt and its proximity to the highway, and why white?
So it's an off white. It's really a light gray. It just appears white in contrast to the black. We go from light gray to medium gray to a little bit darker gray, and then from a much darker gray to an almost charcoal tone. Our intent is that these colors start to tie together the two major masses for 207 for this project, the metal screening and these lighter color fiber cement panels. In terms of cleanability, both the brick, the black, and the white will all have to be maintained and just regular maintenance. We find that as long as it's a gray and not a stark white, that's something that is that's manageable. We've got a number of buildings that are off-white, light gray, fiber cement, and I honestly think that sometimes the lighter colors are easier to maintain than the darker colors, to be honest.
Is the fiber cement a reveal, or is there some sort of batten between the seams?
What we're proposing and what we're detailing is a reveal, similar to like a Nichiha reveal panel.
And on the, I guess, Juliet balconies with the metal screening, the black metal screening at the units, those are for fall protection. They're not any sort of PTAC sort of mechanical system that's to the exterior of the wall, is it?
Correct. They are for fall protection. The mechanical units that we're showing are split systems.
And to that end, you keep saying we're showing, and then I see the star that says all graphics are preliminary and design is subject to change. Like there's things based on approval for things like the detailing that you keep stressing is why this exemplary and why we should approve the fiber cement. But if it ends up coming back and being a fiber cement with exposed battens and large scale panels like a bad multifamily project, that would be really disappointing. So we need like actual confirmation that it's going to be the detailing that you're describing. So when we talk about the reveal panel, I think I'd like to know that the approval of this incorporates that detailing is met when the project is actually built.
Yes, that's fully our intent in drawing it, and I apologize if that's if the way my language is not communicating that. I'm just saying that we're showing that because it's not built, and that this is a design. But I understand what you're stating, and we are fully on the same page. that the intent of presenting this to the design review board is to approve what it is that we're showing, so that we can then take steps to finalize, what we've got to do to be able to move forward with the development. But yeah, we're on the same page that it would be a different project, in my opinion, if you were to slap on battens to every one of those seams. That'd be a very different project.
That's right. That's exactly the point. Yeah, thank you.
I had a couple of questions. In the corner by the railroad in Morgan, is that a transformer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you planning on screening that? Because I think we'll need some screening there to keep people from getting behind it, as well as just not having a transformer exposed.
Yes, that's something that we certainly can do. I think right now in the drawings we're showing it screened by planting, but I believe our clearances around that would allow us to do some sort of a gate or fencing, if that was preferable, so we can maintain access but not visibility.
Right. And then, can you explain a little bit about what's going on with the sidewalk that wraps behind the building, between the railroad and the building? Is that intended to be a public access space, or is that a private for the residences?
It is intended to be public. Sensitive to the comment. We don't have. This is direction that we've gotten in part from conversations with the city. And so we're trying to show what we expect will be there on that north side. But yes, it would be public is the idea.
I'm not sure we've had anything quite like that. Because if we add that, so the reason we harp on having glass, having activity on the street, it's for protection of the pedestrians, and it's to draw people through spaces so that you can't essentially create a blank wall that then stops people from walking to the next block. And putting a public walkway behind the building that is part of the garage that it has no eyes on it would make me nervous as a planned solution. Anyway, I guess we need to.
Yeah, that might be something that we could separate. I can say that this is a conversation that's been largely directed by the city, is this sidewalk. So that's what we're responding to.
They're asking you to work with you on some sort of greenway idea.
Correct. Yes, and that's correct. Exactly.
Yeah, because otherwise, I wouldn't think you would need any sort of public-facing element of the building to the railroad. In fact, those trains are quite loud. I've lived near them, and
yes,
it can be negative.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, you and I are on the same page.
Yeah. I do agree with Cameron that anything you can do to pull people, the way you detail that first floor to pull people along Morgan Street so that they feel comfortable, and I'm hoping this next project explains how you're doing that as well. Because are these two projects being built together, or is one contingent on the other?
No, I wouldn't say that one is fully contingent upon the other. The intent is that they're both the apartment buildings are going to be built more or less in the same phase, and then the garage is also being built right before or during that, so that all of these come up together. These the apartments and the garage, but they're not. I guess they're not. I wouldn't say they're contingent upon each other.
Okay.
I would say the smaller building is contingent upon the larger building, but not the other way around.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any further discussion?
I just have one more comment, and just to preface this, I'm coming at this from a resident perspective, and I'm definitely not an architect. I live on West Jackson, and one thing that we run into in our building a lot is delivery drivers just stopping in the middle of the street with their hazards on, whether it's a FedEx truck, UPS, or Uber Eats or something like that. So something to maybe consider with, the streetscape, which I realize is a conversation with you all and maybe the city, but if there's any sort of loading zone or something where somebody could pull off or, with their hazards on, that I could see that being beneficial, especially if you're trying to think about where a resident's unloading their truck as they move in, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, and we've had those conversations internally as well. In part, that's what the East Jackson access will act as for the garage. It's a large entrance with over 16-foot floor to ceiling clearance that would allow a box truck and deliveries to stop off there and then load into the back of the retail spaces or to the front, but that way it's off the street.
Thank you.
One last comment on the Juliet balconies facing the street. I think the beauty of having brick masonry and having the massing with the depth that you're going to start reading with those punches for all the units, it seems as like the Juliet portion is fighting that because it's projecting proud of the face of the masonry. If there was any way to detail that to be inboard or flush with the storefront or the glazing that's facing to the outside, I think it's going to actually have the reading of the depth of the brick be a lot more pronounced and not be interrupted with the protruding Juliet like metal screening that's coming out from that on the south elevation.
Understood. And that's something that we could certainly look into. The precedents that we're referring to that we liked for this project had that detail. And so that something that we kind of explored and lifted. But certainly I'm not disagreeing with that being a potentially successful approach as well.
I agree with Cameron on that point. I think the depth is lacking there. Is the brick and the fiber cement coplanar there, or are those metal panels?
That's fiber cement panels. And yes, they are intended to be coplanar. That was the intent of the design, yes.
Okay, well, yeah, to his point, I think anything you can do to kind of increase that depth difference, I think would really help to really provide more prominence to the brick portion at the base, which is really what you're trying to draw from the context from. I was a little disappointed at the lack of context driving this. In some ways, it's creating its own context, I realize, because there's empty lots around it. But I'm not really sure how the brick elevation relates to some of the other buildings on the street. I can see it. It seems like it's slightly elevated, but could you speak a little bit about how you're breaking up the brick expanse horizontally? It looks like there's reveals, but are those really just control joints?
Yeah, so we're locating, I would say, reveals or exaggerated control joints in the brick to be able to create a rhythm or some regulating lines on the facade. The scale and the massing of the brick is intended, especially where it connects to the old city on the west end of the project, be more in scale with the adjacent buildings. It's a building over where the first one starts, but they kind of fall within that height range of that third story. And then as we get closer to James White Parkway and the interstate, which is a very different context, we're looking to kind of rise up and address that too, as well as what's underneath to the stadium is a much larger project. So, yeah, I think when you said that this kind of creates its own context, it does. Our intent is to respond to the old city through the use of like an earth-toned brick, which is, the predominant material used throughout Old City, as well as responding to that scale by dropping the height. In terms of the length of the building, the horizontal, I think these larger windows start to break up this modern, larger building and this mass. I think that it does that pretty successfully. And after kind of going back and forth in several design concepts, we felt like exposing the linearity and the size of this building actually served the design rather than detracted from it. So we were actually drawn to this horizontal band of brick because it is a big, modern building, built to, meet modern lifestyles and including, contemporary construction in Knoxville that includes a very large stadium and cars and interstates and that sort of thing, while also focusing on the pedestrian experience and a long linear stretch of retail. So that's obviously is something that it goes on for a year, so it's a very long process and there are a lot of thoughts, but I think that starts to describe some of what drove us to this solution.
That's great. I think one other thought. It's hard to tell in the rendering, but are some of the bricks proud of the surface? Are they protruding in any way, or is that just
the windows are set back, and so the intent there is to show the depth of the brick. The bricks themselves in 301 on the right hand, or sorry, I'm looking at a different presentation, but to the east of this, we do have brick detailing where the bricks do protrude out. For 207, we didn't want to repeat that same detail. What we're doing there is using a really good mix of a mixed palette of bricks, and you can see that actually in the material sample in that bottom left of some of these elevation images to create that texture that's often found in the Old City as the natural firing process of bricks. Turns out varying colors of bricks. We kind of want to show that variety, which creates an effect of the bricks almost look like they're coming out or are in different planes, but really they're just a variety of them.
Yeah, I agree, and I know we'll get to that project, but I was just curious. It looked like some shadow lines, but I think that may just be some darker variation in the brick. My last comment is in terms of where the brick ends at the top, is there going to be any sort of metal coping, or how are you terminating the brick there?
Yes, there'll be metal flashing. One thing that was important for us is to bring the cement fiberboard siding out to the face of the brick through furring to minimize like dirt buildup so that when it rains it's not building up and then washing on the face of the brick. That will alleviate most of the concern of kind of what you're talking about in terms of like a full coping, and will allow us to do a clean, simple flashing detail that is not intended to deal with a lot of water buildup because of how the assembly is being designed. Does that make sense? I don't know how familiar you are.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially on the balconies type area. But more of my concern is between the panel and the brick. I think anything you can do to add depth there, even adding some brick detailing to terminate it, I think could go a long way. maybe some protruding bricks there. But overall, I think this is an elegant project, and I really appreciate the restrained use of colors and materials.
I do have one more comment, and that is, I think Tony mentioning this brought it up to me, that the base of the building, the material at the ground level, what is that?
That's metal ACM panels, like a dark gray, almost black, and that's also going to be mixed with the black aluminum storefront.
Okay. It doesn't have as much articulation like the rest of the fiber cement, so I'm assuming you're not going to get an expanse that entire bay. It's going to have vertical ribs or something in it to march across that facade, correct?
Yes, it'll have joints in it. Those will be aligned with the windows as that material allows. But yes.
And did you study it with brick coming to the base, rather than the brick masonry actually coming to the ground rather than metal breaking it up?
Yes, we did. I think one of the things that we found with this option is that it kind of creates a banner effect and creates a strong base that defines the retail and the pedestrian experience and helps to separate that from the residential structure. As you can see, these signs, they kind of, and we'll submit those at a later date, an actual sign package. But the black banner, if you will, the metal panels act as a backdrop to that and just forms a really strong base. After studying a number of other similar developments, that strong base language really helped to kind of break up that experience. It's already a big building, and so bringing the brick all the way down to the base started to feel, in our studies, it for this particular project started to feel imposing.
Yeah, I guess now that I'm really understanding that material, I wish there was one less material on that facade, because the base of metal, brick, fiber cement, one color, fiber cement, another color is, I think the 2/3, 1/3 proportion with the base being heavier with the brick may have been okay. I understand, and it doesn't have like full brick going to the ground because it'd be broken up with the glazing, but the scale of that band from the top of the awning to the underside of the glazing, like that strip of ACM is really thick, and it kind of seems out of scale proportion. I know what it is. It's the same gap that's floor to floor. It's determined by that. I think it would be better served to be thinner, and more brick would come down then that head of metal above the awning is just really big. And I think is complicating the facade a little bit too much.
I have a little bit of a concern if it gets too much thinner that it'll look kind of weak, because there's that banding that happens at the other floor-to-floor levels horizontally. And so I think if it becomes too thin, it'll be...
Maybe I want it to be so thin so it'll just go away. So
that's a different thing.
It was a facetious endeavor. Last thing, I do agree also with Tony. I understand your concern of the building up of dirt and things on these ledges if you start to have too many pushes and pulls. But the way these the material transitions are extremely important, because it'll look really flat between them if not done well. So I appreciate Tony's comment about maybe at the top of the brick, if there is a row lock or something. I don't want to see like a traditional homes lock up there, but just something that breaks up that striation of material with good detailing so that it doesn't read as flat is going to be really important. Just like the reveals and the detailing at the fiber cement.
Okay, if we don't,
I can't
Sorry,
tell by the
yeah,
look.
sorry, I dropped out for a second.
I was about to
I'm
say, I feel
sorry.
like his lack of response might mean that his
Right,
connection ended.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was, through my computer. No, I'm kidding. So I think I picked up everything that was stated. We were just talking again about like Rolock or brick detailing at the top of the brick that is that
Yeah, it
what we
was
were
really
talking about?
just all of the material transitions. You said it was a design intent to make them coplanar. I was just saying I understand the longevity and the durability and the concern about weathering of the streaking if you start to create ledges. But I think if that's the case, maybe there needs to be a exaggerated reveal between them to where if there isn't depth in the plane, then there's just actual distance given in the material transitions, or just something that breaks them up so it has that, like you mentioned, the striated reading of the different materiality.
Yeah, yeah, understood. And I think that just from our design process and the precedents that we were drawn to, that coplanar reading is something that we were going for, not only from a constructability, not constructability, but like maintenance, having that being a very clean line, but also how it relates to the, for instance, banding between the windows. It reads as if like the black almost fades behind the brick. So I think that was or not. I think it was a design intent, but I understand that there are different ways you could go about that, and I fully hear your point and appreciate that. So yeah, that's my response.
Okay, if there's no other comments or discussion, we will entertain a motion.
Well, I've not heard any real conversation here that has a dramatic impact on the form of this building or really its materiality. It's really a lot about the detailing, and I'm fairly satisfied with the response of the architect on his ways to approach our concerns relative to the detailing. So I would make a motion to approve based on the detailing as outlined by the architect in our conversations here.
I would like to add that they include the screening for the transformer. And I would not be comfortable approving the sidewalk behind the building without knowing more about it. Because if it becomes a sidewalk, it becomes that becomes a streetscape.
The sidewalk is not on our site. That is right away. So it'd be some sort of city project.
Well, but the building would then have to react to it in a proper way.
Is that a known condition though, or that's still in flux right now?
Yeah, I don't have any information on that right now.
Do we know if the railroad is that an easement, or is the building, or does the railroad own that land?
It's shown as right of way, so it should be railroad property.
I guess what I mean is, does the railroad have an easement, or does the railroad own that property?
Usually the right-of-way is owned by the railway, typically.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a lot of laws that govern how that works. So I'm just curious, because if the railroad has an easement, it'll have a very hard time putting a sidewalk there. If it owns the land, then they can put a sidewalk there. Even if they cooperate with the city, the federal law doesn't allow them to just modify the use of that land.
My general impression is we weren't necessarily approving the sidewalk on Jackson either, that it's a response to future public improvement. And so if the city's pushing for a greenway along the railroad right away, that may or may not happen. I don't know that that's part of what we'd be approving today.
I guess what I'm saying is the back should be approved contingent that the sidewalk is not there.
Well, I'd say I'm not sure we can approve it contingent upon the sidewalk not being there, if we don't have control of whether the sidewalk's going to be there or not. And that would just hold up a project until some unknown time that we know whether a sidewalk's going to be there or not. So I guess I would discourage making a condition that, regarding whether the sidewalk is there or not. I mean, there's nothing that I see that looks too problematic, knowing that the structure is what it is. At that point, it does have an entrance to the back, at least closer to Morgan. I assume the lights obviously are there for the future sidewalk, more than just for accent lighting in general. But
Well, that side of the building will be visible, so even just as visual appeal lighting, it's relevant, even if it's not a pedestrian way. I agree with Mike. I think that if they decide to put a sidewalk there, that's an existing condition at that point, and I don't think it's fair to hold up the project based on something that we don't have any knowledge or control over.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, if they're working with the city to put the sidewalk there, then that's a known condition, just like the streetscape is a known condition on both sides of the other sides. And, our guidelines require us to react to that. If, like the owner said that, or the rep said that they don't even know if that's going to go in there at this point, I think it could go forward. I personally don't think they can even put it in, knowing railroad law the little bit I know. So,
if I may, if this provides any clarity, is it okay if I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Okay. This sidewalk is a concept that the city is working on. This is not something that we are responding to a request from the city to as a concept the city is looking at. This is not really even a part of this project. The current condition is that this is, so I wouldn't be able to answer a lot of these, questions because I don't know what conversations the city has had. We're showing this concept again because the city's asked us to show what we're showing here. But we have no confirmations from the city that this would get built or move forward, or we don't really know all that much about it. So if that doesn't move forward, what we would build here is is this end of our building. But we wanted to make sure that we're kind of being responsive to where if something happened in the future, like like what's been described to us, that we could respond to those conditions. Whereas every other building down the line here doesn't have any access, or they don't address this side at all because it's always or for a very long time been railroad. We're just trying to future-proof the building, so to speak. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
yeah, it is.
Just a little context.
All right, I'll withdraw that portion, but I would like to see the screening in there.
Are you okay with that, Perry?
Adding the transformer screen, I think, is wise.
Okay.
Did we, if I could, I was just going to ask, in our discussion, we talked about the screening at the very top of the, kind of extending that to the garage. Would we include that in as well?
I think the offer was that they could do some site studies to see what the sight lines are, and if that shows that the cars are visible, then extend.
If I could make two suggestions. The first one being Mark mentioned earlier that one of the conditions had the wrong section of the code cited in it, so that would need to be revised to say 5.5. I believe it's condition number 2. Also, Christina, if you're still there, you could chime in on this possibly, but Perry, I don't believe that your motion is sufficiently explicit enough on what you want seen. As I'm recording the minutes, I don't think that that's something that I could put into words that can be enforced, just referencing a conversation, the conversation that was had here. I think that we would need more explicit guidelines on what you all want to see in that condition.
Would you like to rephrase your motion?
Well, trying to recap an hour's worth of reglets and flashings and materials, I mean, I would, restate the motion to be approved as presented per staff recommendations and correcting the code reference, adding the screening for the transformer, and that if, and assuring that these are, flush panels and no battens as discussed. I think that reflects the, majority of the discussion.
Mike, is that clear enough when you?
Well, I think we understand what he's trying to get to, but basically is what the applicant it said was, I guess they explained how the image was going to, how the materials are going to be implemented on the structure, and there's some clarifications. I think we could look back into the minutes and the video if needed to see details, but yeah, it's kind of, it's going to be a tough one for staff to administer regardless, not, be able to see these fine details. I think if the plan is submitted as they intend to construct, then that's really the most beneficial way for staff to be able to approve eventually the permit plans.
Yeah, materials as submitted. I mean, as drawn, that's how it's, I mean, it's graphically conveyed in that way. So as submitted, as drawn, that's what you can look at. You can look at that drawing and say, does it look like that drawing? That can be it.
Okay, we have a motion. Are you okay, Dallas?
Can I restate the motion?
Sure,
just
please.
to be sure I have it correctly.
Mhm.
So the motion is to approve per staff recommendation with the correction to condition number 2 to reflect section 5.5 of the zoning code, to ensure that there is screening for the transformer, and to ensure that there are flush panels and no visible battens.
Right, and I think as Cameron, as we could add the construction to reflect as presented.
That captures all of it.
Okay, thank you.
So long as it looks like that.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Not so fast, everyone. We have another one. Okay, next up is our second case, 301 East Jackson Avenue, which is number 12C24DT. Mike, can you take us through this description, please?
Sure. So I'll keep it pretty brief since it's kind of a continuation of the previous conversation. It is a slightly different project, obviously. It has some different materials. So this is across the street, across Morgan Street. It is a triangular shaped lot. They obtained a few variances that they're just pretty tough to meet on a site of this shape. They have a plaza on the Jackson Avenue side of the property, and the retail is set back as well as the rest of the building, set back from Jackson Avenue has one entrance. The retail has one entrance from Morgan, and I believe two entrances from the plaza or patio area. Again, it's a 5-story building. Has residential on the upper floors. It does have retail and some residential on the ground floor. The staff recommendation is to approve, subject to the following conditions: final elevations, drawings, and site plan to meet relevant standards of the city engineering and zoning code, signage to return to the DRB for separate application.
Thank you. Is the applicant present? Same applicant.
Yes, same representative and applicant. Yes.
Great, thank you. Do you all have anything to add to Mike's comments?
No, we don't. We can go ahead and move on to discussion.
Great. Okay, let's open it up to the board for discussion.
One question, is that lower darker portion a deep red or a brown?
It is a darker brown.
Yay, it's not black. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to say that I like the texture and the patterning on this building. I think that it strikes a really good balance between modern and some of the other historic context in the area. So I feel like that is a good move. But related to the detailing discussion from last time, I feel like it's a little bit ambiguous and a little bit flat. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about how that's going to look in real life and what the texture, how the texture is going to come through.
Sure. So this building has a couple of kind of jumps in its material change. We wanted to respond to the context of the interstate, James White Parkway, just immediately to the east of the building. These darker materials, because of it being an interstate, the things that you're going to be cleaning are in large part, soot and other darker materials. So we kind of jump that darker material up as it gets closer to the interstate to alleviate some of that maintenance. It also kind of, you can see from the corner view as it gets to Morgan and Jackson, just kind of hugs the massing of the building. In terms of the depth, there are a few main areas where we're creating depth in the facade. One is the retail entry and kind of that connection to the patio or plaza space and into the retail. There's a lot of grade change, and so that point is important in terms of accessibility, but also it gives us an opportunity to create an inset and a lot of depth that on the pedestrian level you'll really experience. It also gives us a way to accentuate this kind of darker brick material and its separation from the lighter brick material. We're showing black or dark bronze aluminum storefront, as well as that brown brick, that dark brown brick, and brake metal panel to match the storefront texture. As you get further up onto Morgan, there's an inset that happens. That's the retail entry and a secondary access for the retail space, kind of back access for the retail space as well. So that creates a good deal of depth. We actually extended that cut up to the third level, and then that kind of helps to break apart the lighter colored brick from the darker colored brick there. And then also just generally with the windows and how we're dealing with the fenestration, not only do we have this brick detailing that is connecting the windows, but also because it's a brick building, we're setting these windows back similarly to how we did 207 to create some depth. As you rotate around the building, to the north side. We really tried to accentuate those openings to create those taller verticals to again separate the language between the darker brick and the lighter brick. There will be a steel lintel at the top of that dark brick to again kind of further accentuate that break of materials. In terms of them being planar, again, that was a design and maintenance decision that we made. It's something that is a more contemporary detailing to where you have like two materials that are, whether they're similar or not similar, but they're coplanar to minimize the water buildup or water intrusion, and also just dirt and other things that would create maintenance issues or would be potentially unsightly. And so those are flush and aligned. And for us, that was intentional. And we locate our control joints and lintels and work with other elements to create that depth that you can see here as presented.
Thank you for that explanation, and I appreciate your thoughtfulness around maintenance and how the building's going to patina in its context. So that's very appreciated. I also wanted to talk about the pattern, the infill brick patterns between the windows on the lighter colored brick areas. If you had considered letting that be a vertical element rather than individual rectangles, because there is a little bit of a pancaking effect that's happening at that floor level, and just wondered if you had explored that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Connecting the windows vertically instead of horizontally.
Well, connecting the specialty brick pattern, right there.
Yeah.
With each other as a vertical element rather than starting and stopping at each floor.
I see. Instead of having that banding. Yes, we did explore that, and to be honest, we didn't love it. The horizontality of the lighter colored brick massing does contrast, even though it's really important to maintain, or is important for us to maintain the regulating lines in the project. We do have a contrast between the vertical language of the darker brick and the horizontal language of the lighter colored brick. So while we did explore connecting that brick pattern vertically, when we looked at that, we felt like it looked weird and it started to not create a distinct language between these two forms that we felt like was important for the party of the design.
Great, thank you for that.
Can you speak to what the soffit material would be as a pedestrian walking through? Also in the portion at the entrance where it bumps up to the third floor, will that be the same soffit material up there as well?
Yes. So on the sides, we're keeping that same brick material, and at the top, we're doing sheet metal. So it'll be like it'll match the finish of the storefront. So you really experience that kind of that cut through, or the carve out, so to speak. So when you carve out the building, you get the storefront, the black storefront material.
I see. So the storefront material will wrap up and into the horizontal.
Correct, and become the soffit.
Got it. Thanks.
But just as a matter of detailing the front face of it, the brick will come down and then it'll turn, and so you'll have you'll be able to experience also that full brick depth as well, which we think would be a nice detail. If you were standing in that kind of that crevice and looking up, you would be able to see the full brick width and then a reveal and then a black metal soffit.
Got it. That sounds elegant. I would personally like to include that in any motion for that to be the case, since it's not explicit here.
You mentioned earlier the adhering to the party in the project, and I think this would have been a really good candidate for a diagram that showed what the party is as far as just the differentiation between the light and brown brick. I think if what you're going for is maintenance and durability, so they're coplanar, and so it has a very flat facade in that regard, except for the scoop at the entry. It has to have some consistency and rigor to the where the the darker brick breaks that vertical plane going up. It's very, very haphazard right now, and I don't really see consistency as I scroll through the or proportionality, I guess, as you go through it. Like, I think the Morgan Street facing facade has the most proportion to it. It has the base middle top. It has the justification of the dark brick to the bottom left. But as you wrap around the building, it kind of just loses any sort of I don't know, a party. Like, if I'm looking at that south elevation on I don't know, there's not a sheet number, but the south elevation, the pier elevation, there's so much happening. And I know that's looking off into the distance with all the stair towers beyond, but those were choices made in this. So it just really doesn't have any rigor to the rest of those decisions. Like, it breaks down as you go around the building. I think the back, the north facing facade and the west facing talk to each other as that dark brick wraps around, but then as it turns to the north and east, south and east, it loses it. So I get why you're not trying to bring anything out to have durability and those sort of things. I think that if you can bring out the light brick at those infill panels, those infill sections between the windows ever so slightly to get that dance of the inset and not inset brick, then is there no way that the lighter brick could have that like half-inch protrusion above the dark brown? So there maybe could be a tiny bit of shadow reveal through it. But if that's still not palatable for your durability, I think there at least has to be a rethinking of that relationship between the dark and the light across the building. If that is these are the pieces we have to use. We don't want to make these moves because of durability. We can do scoops here. We can't there. There's something off about the party through the secondary facades.
So thank you for that comment. So our goals with the secondary facades, if you will, first of all, yes, in elevation, you can see there's a lot of stepping because it's immediately adjacent to the interstate, and there's we wanted to make sure that the faces that were facing Morgan and to the north and to the extent that we can on the south facade were as consistent and planar as possible to maintain the street edge and the pedestrian experience and what we'll all experience as we're walking around these buildings. When it comes to the facades facing and immediately adjacent to the interstate, which is a little bit of the south, and then the east facade, the party is that the darker brick jumps up to kind of meet the scale, or not kind of to, it jumps up to meet the scale of the interstate. That is then broken by the stair tower. Part of that was just to create visual interest, and we're because there's limitations to how much glazing and activation we can have on the east facade that faces the interstate. We interrupted that kind of darker brick with this lighter color stair tower. And so I see, I hear what you're saying. We are breaking the party to insert that vertical tower, and then the darker brick kind of frames that as well. We felt like that was based on the views that we looked at on the interstate. that was the most successful iteration of what we'd come up with. One thing that we're not seeing in this view here is that the interstate cuts off a significant portion of the building, and so we wanted people to be able to experience the different materials as they were, driving by on the interstate, to the extent that we could do that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I understand. I think ultimately it would be a study of when does that dark brick start and stop, and I think it's the fact that it's level 4 it looks like level 4 is the moment we chose to have that horizontality with the relationship to the lighter brick, and I feel like it maybe could have stood to go down to level 3 and not level 4, and that would have allowed like the proportions of that back, the north-facing facade, to start to have a heavier top than bottom, and that starts to get into more of a design opinion, so that's not where we're here, is to have just pure design opinion, but I'm trying to make sense of the rigor that you were describing earlier to someone else's answer about the party.
Well, if I might say something, for those windows facing the railroad, I would be very careful about your acoustic performance of those because those trains will wake everybody up at 3 in the morning. That's just a comment. The big kind of blank wall where you have your signage along Morgan Street, I think that is a bit too wide without. I understand you have an apartment there, and I guess you didn't want to put a window in the living room along the street, but that's...
Yeah, correct. That was the primary reason that we wanted to orient that unit to face to the north. And also there is a lot of glazing. We actually do like moments of respite as you're walking on the sidewalk. That is something that we did get approval from the for a variance from the BZA meeting.
What is the statement of the variance?
I don't have that on me right now, but it was specifically approving that blank facade width.
Yeah, I think it was just like a few inches longer, if I recall. It wasn't like 35 feet is the maximum width for a blank wall. I think it was like 35 feet, 2 inches or something along those lines.
Okay. Well, that won't make it a contingency, but a window in that living room might actually help turn that corner so it feels like there's a corner to be there rather than just a blankness.
My fear, Josh, with the window in the living room is the learner lofts at Wall and Gay, where that has ground floor residential and it's just covered entirely. And so you just see glass and then a gray film and maybe lose an opportunity for good masonry or a mural or something.
Yeah, I was saying I wouldn't make it a requirement.
Right. No, yeah, I was just...
But they chose the use of that corner, and it would be better if that corner had some more transparency in it. That's part of their choices in design.
Do we have any other comments? If not, we will entertain a motion. Be clear and specific.
Tony, you wanted to include something. Maybe you should entertain it.
I'll go for it. I'll make a motion to approve based on staff comments with adding a note that the soffit material at the entrances be consistent with the storefront, what's adjacent to the storefront materials. Is it metal panel? That was, let me scroll through.
It would be a steel plate, most likely.
Correct.
But
So
it would be
the
a metal
steel plate
finish.
that relates with the storefront.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you both. Moving on, we're going to go to our infill housing section. The first in that list is 2815 Johnston Street, which is case number 2A25IH.
Again, I apologize. I'm having some issues with my computer. Let me see if I can get this up. Okay, let me see. Excuse me. Need to share again. Come on. Okay. Okay, so this is a detached house, 2815 Johnston Street. So this is the right one? 2A25 IHS. So it's a new primary residence fronting Johnston Street, two-story residence featuring a front gable, an exterior horizontal siding with corner boards, block foundation, clad in stucco. The house is 40 feet long by 16 feet wide. 20 feet wide with a 4-foot massing recess towards the rear, as proposed to be set 27 feet from the front property line. It'll feature 6-foot depth, deep front porch recessed under a shed roof with an engaged front gable accent over the front door. Supported by 3 8-inch square posts. Parking is an 18-foot wide concrete driveway flush with the front of the house and access from the alley, which runs parallel to the lot. Some of the applicable design standards to consider are from the alleys. Parking should be not in the front yards. Alleys should be used for garages and parking pad locations. The front elevations of houses should be designed at similar scale to other houses along the street. Front porches should extend about 8 to 12 feet towards the street from a habitable portion of the house. Porches should extend into the front yard setback if necessary to maintain consistency with other porches on the street. So part of this discussion is to be that the board should to discuss the proposed building width. The applicant has used this this design on a different lot, but in that other case, the lot was much more narrow, about 30 feet wide compared to this property, which is, so it ends up with a bit of a house that's out of scale in comparison to others on the street. So although this property does have an alley, and it is using it for access for the parking, the location of the parking pad should be revised to be at least 20 feet behind the front facade of the structure. Let me show you where that's at on the site plan. It's basically it extends to the, so here's the house. The alley is to this bottom side of this site plan. Johnston Street's to the right side. The parking pad basically extends to the front of the porch, which is beyond the front habitable portion of the house. So recommendation is to move the parking pad further to the rear. So the two-bay, two-story facade is more narrow than other houses on the street by at least 7 feet to 10 feet. It is taller than the context, which is mostly one-story houses. The house has the full length of the porch is 6 feet deep. The recommendation is to have at least an 8-foot porch depth. At least one window should be added to the side elevation here on the front portion of the house, either on the first floor or second floor. So that pretty much covers the staff recommendation, which is that the board should discuss the width and scale of the house in the neighborhood context. If determined appropriate by the board, conditions of approval should include parking to be revised to meet the design guidelines with final site approval by city engineering, front porch to be increased to 8-foot depth, additional window to be added to the left side elevation, and right side window to be revised to a double hung window. Final construction to retain details shown in the drawing, and final site plan should include new native or naturalized trees in front and rear yards, or examining mature trees on the lot should be or existing mature trees should be preserved.
Thank you for that, Mike. Well, is the applicant present on Zoom?
No, he's not.
He's not, okay. Well, then we'll open it up to discussion by the board, particularly related to the scale, which was mentioned in the report.
Would there be any way to pull up a street view if it doesn't break your computer?
No promises. This is the lot here.
There's not a whole lot around it.
Which one's the lot?
It's just beyond this white house here. It's this vacant lot here adjacent to the alley. So this lot here. Oops, did not mean to do that.
I mean, it's like it's trying to be a like a shotgun house, or like what they call them, a camelback. Whenever you put the upper floor on it, because it's 16 feet wide, but it has that little protrusion that if they just made it as wide as the extra appendage they put on it, it would be comparable to the width of the other homes, I believe. It's hard to ask them to just make it wider for wider's sake for the proportion, because that's adding a lot of square footage to the building, that they may just be like, they like the efficiency of it being smaller, or narrower.
I think given the context, it's not a problem that it is not exactly like everything else around it.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
I mean, the variation, I think, is welcome and not inappropriate.
How wide is the lot that it's on? I can't.
50 feet, 50.8 feet.
Okay, so it's a typical lot, so.
Yeah, you end up with, was about 11.3 feet on the north side of the house and 19.2 feet on the south side of the house. It's fairly significant setbacks.
Is it because the intent is for them to have a driveway, right? It says on here, like a little
Yeah,
driveway.
that's part of it.
So they want to be able to park next to their house, and that's more important than
Oh.
the square footage.
That's 100% what it is probably, is the driveway.
Yeah, there's
Says
a
here on
nice
that.
little rendering on 3 sheets back in the packet that shows the intent where there's a tree-lined edge yard and on the right side and then the driveway on the left side.
I don't know if we should
So-
trust that because it shows up on the next case too. And I
Yeah.
don't think it's the same house.
Yeah, I would say that's a generic image that was displayed on the
Unfortunately.
plan set.
But it is an arrangement that fits
Yeah.
on this lot.
That's right.
I agree with Suzanne. I think the scale is fine, given the nature of where this lot is. I think it's already kind of an abnormal spot in the neighborhood, and there's a lot of variation on the corners around it. So,
And just-
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to clarify one thing that I said. In the site layout, it shows the parking pad coming off the alley, so it doesn't have a long driveway from the front. Sorry, go ahead.
Mike, can you clarify what the staff recommendation is for the lot? Is it that it slide back past the front face of the?
For the parking
Yeah.
area. Let me see exactly what it says. So the guidelines, this is an odd arrangement, okay? So typically you would have either if the lot has an alley, it'd be to the rear. And then you'd still have parking coming from the back side of the property instead of from the side. Otherwise, if there's not an alley, then you're coming from the front. So the staff recommendation is kind of using the front access standards as like a basis for the recommendation. So, front access, you would have a skinny driveway going to the house, and then as soon as it hits the house, it can widen out, but it has to be 20 feet deep. So that the parking area is really behind, or at least to the side of the house. And here, it's the parking pad essentially extends beyond the front habitable portion of the house and extends out to the edge of the front porch. So really, it's not meeting the intent. If this was coming from the front, we would require the skinny driveway to continue all the way to the habitable portion of the house and then extend back. So we really need to push that back.
I agree with that. I would even suggest maybe flipping the driveway to the other side of the side access. If they need the double car spot.
I wonder if that decision was made based on the slope of the lot, if they maybe put it on that upper part because it was required maybe less grading. But it's hard to say from what we can see.
I mean, there's something to be said about us having to infer and them not being here to talk about it. I will say,
Agreed.
us having to assume is not good. And I would say that there is grounds to just postpone it till they can be here. I don't know if that's, I don't know. I
Yeah.
think there's just something, if we're having to just guess, that's not good to not have the dialogue.
Yeah, you can postpone to allow applicant to be present to answer questions on the application. Just need to specify the time frame. I would just suggest a 30-day postponement.
What's the major concern, though? Is it just the parking?
I don't have a concern. It's just in the past when they've not been here, and there's been a lot of comments. It's like, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. It's just to have that clarification would be good. But if, as a board, the proportions aren't an issue and it's really just discussion of a driveway, then it maybe doesn't need them to be standing here to have the discussion.
Yeah, just that if we required them to be here, because they're not technically required to be here, or else we wouldn't even be seeing it. So I would be perfectly fine requiring that in the future. I agree with you, they should be here, but our rules don't require them to be here, so I don't want to.
Yeah, we tell applicants, we highly recommend they be here or be subject to postponement. If answers can't be, if they can't address questions from the board, I mean, it's their responsibility to be here to address.
It should be noted they have 2 other cases on the infill housing agenda today.
I think you can make a motion to postpone and we can vote on it. And if enough board members support the postponement, then we can go forward with that. Otherwise, we can kick it.
You could probably make a motion to postpone all of the cases that pertain to this applicant as well.
You got this, camera.
Or the next 2.
I'd say the next one is similar to this case. The last one is a different design. I don't know if there's any reason to discuss. I would at least have it like introduce them, and y'all can decide to postpone one or both of the remaining 2 if you want to. But
I know on this third case that I do have questions for an applicant if they were here. So rather than me just saying of sweeping, this is required without them here to talk about it would be, I don't think a good use of our time.
Let's go through them individually. Sure. And if when they arise, it seems unnecessary to talk about it without them here, then we'll just make a motion to postpone. With this one in particular, to Josh's point, if our concerns are really limited to the parking arrangement, I think that that's something that's in the purview of staff, and based on staff comments, they can resolve that in a satisfactory way. That's my opinion.
I agree. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve based on staff recommendations, especially with the drive aisle being behind the main facade line.
Yeah, I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that one carries. Thank you. We're going to move forward with the next one, which is 342 Chickamauga Avenue, which is case number 2C25IH. I believe this is the same applicant. And we're just going to take a look and see if we want to proceed with discussion.
okay, as mentioned, this is the same house design. So I won't go over the house itself. It has the same concerns. Staff has the same concerns with the massing in relation to the other houses in the street. The parking on this one, and feel free to jump in, Linda, if you have an answer quicker than I can find it. Parking should not be in the front. Let's see here. I was looking at the site plan real fast. I didn't see where the parking was.
It looks like it comes off. Okay.
Yeah, the parking is accessed from the front of the street, which goes against design guidelines, which require parking to be accessed from the alley if there is one.
Thank you. The recommendation is for the board again to discuss the width and scale of the house in the neighborhood in the neighborhood context. If determined to be appropriate conditions, the following conditions should be included. One, the parking to be revised to meet the design guidelines with final site plan meeting city engineering standards. Front porch to be increased to 8-foot depth. Additional window to be added to the left side elevation, and the right side window to be revised to a double hung window. Number 4, final construction to retain details shown in the drawing, and final site plan should include native and or naturalized trees in the front and rear yards. And I can bring up street view again if needed.
I think it would be helpful to have street view.
In this situation, the houses around it are significantly wider, generally cross gable, nothing two-story or even dormered on the street. I see why they did the driveway off the streets, because the existing house's driveway comes off the street, but it does have a viable alley for the parking to come off the back. But unlike the Lonsdale one, I think the scale is an issue here, both in its width and its height.
Without the applicant being here, do you want to have further discussion, or would you rather postpone or even not approve it based on those comments?
I don't know that this one can be salvaged on this lot. I would move to deny.
Second.
We have a motion to deny and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Moving on, we're going, yeah.
As long as they come back with a substantial revision, then they can submit again. If they can't come back with the same design within a year.
Great, thanks. We're going to move on to the next one, which is 2136 Apricot Avenue, case number 2F25IH. Whoa. I think,
I can just go through the staff report. If you need to do visuals on the screen, we can. I'll try to get it pulled up in a moment.
we might not need to get that far. Why don't you do your report and then we'll decide.
It'd be a little bit easier with the visuals on, but so this is a new primary structure, duplex fronting Apricot Avenue, two-story building featured a side gable roof, 612 pitch, and an exterior of lap siding with corner boards and cedar texture accent boards at the top of each story, and a block foundation clad in stucco. The duplex is 34 feet wide by 50 feet deep, and will be set 20 feet from the front property line. Each unit features a 6 foot 9 inch wide by 4 foot 5 inch deep front porch at the edge of the facade, and the porches are recessed under a front gabled roof supported by 2 square posts. The site plan does not feature any parking. So that's the front facade. So the site is kind of a unique location. It's kind of like a remnant lot. It is platted, so it is a lot of record. Oops, no, wrong one. So it can be built on. The road itself kind of looks like an alley, a named alley it probably was an alley, originally intended to be an alley, but it is the only frontage for the property. So Apricot Avenue here, Ohio is just to the south. The asphalt for Apricot Avenue ends just before this property, so most likely engineering will require the asphalt to be extended. We don't know yet whether fire department will require a turnaround at the end of this road or not. On the mapping, it shows a kind of a driveway, kind of continuing over to Ohio Avenue, but really there's no easements, it's not right of way. I think it's just people have been using it as circulation across those people's property. So if a turnaround is required, that could be a substantial change. We just don't have an answer to that yet.
So since the applicant is not here, we have the option to continue discussing this without answers to our questions, or we can move to postpone or deny.
I motion to postpone this case
Yeah,
because there are questions.
I think we also need engineering here for this one, because that Apricot's barely an alley. The pavement doesn't extend, there's no turnaround, so it's a dead end, which is generally not allowed even in alleys. The alley that's behind it is not there. And so there's just too many questions, so I will second Cameron's motion.
Could we get a specific date for the postponement as required by the admin rules?
If you could just say a 30-day postponement, that should work.
I motion to postpone for 30 days to the next design review board.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to postpone for 30 days. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries on that one.
I had a quick question about it, though. On those front porches, I know there's some different rules for townhouses versus row houses versus like micro multifamily or whatever. Are those porches appropriate? Like, are those, we have that 6-foot requirement. Does that count for a duplex?
There's design standards, and I think it would apply regardless. I mean, the design standards they're guidelines, so they're not they're not zoning standards, but it would still apply in this case. Like the recommendation to have a deeper porch would still apply. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because when we've had some row houses and other like kind of multifamily approaches to this sort of thing,
Yeah, I think
it's been stated that it's not.
I thought stoops were allowed for townhouse
It can be.
style.
It's usually you look at the front at the store at the. There's no block here. There's no context. So you look at the context of the street. If the street is predominantly stoop, then a stoop style entrance is going to be okay. If it's predominantly porches, then usually the porch is the preferred. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Melinda.
Yes, this project is using the middle housing standards, which do allow for either a porch or a stoop, but the applicant will probably need to revise the depth of that to meet both the middle housing standards and perhaps the infill ones as well. The applicant will also likely have to add additional design elements to meet the middle housing design guidelines, which could require additional review.
Yeah, thanks. Because I know that we're not as familiar with the middle housing since it's relatively new. So it'd be great to have that, requirements pushed out when we are going to bump into them. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Moving on. Our next one is 1233 Connecticut Avenue, which is case number 2I25IH.
Okay. Okay, so this is a new primary structure fronting Connecticut Avenue, 1.5-story residence featuring a front gable 10-12 pitch roof, an exterior fiber cement lap siding with wood grain finish, and a concrete foundation clad with brick veneer. The house is 28 feet wide by 62 feet deep and will be set 31.2 feet from the front property line. It features a partial width 8-foot deep front porch recessed under a hipped roof and supported by two 6-inch square posts. Parking is a 20-foot by 20-foot parking pad at the rear of the property and is accessed from the alley. The front facade, the front southeast facade features 3 bays, 2 1/1 double hung windows on the left bay, a paneled front door in the center bay, and a projecting front gable massing with 2 1/1 double hung windows on the right bay. The facade features another front gable massing in the center and right bays, and all the gable fields are clad in faux shake siding. The right elevation features a 1/1 double hung window, or 3 1/1 double hung windows, and the left elevation features 4 1/1 double hung windows. The rear elevation features a second entrance behind an 18-foot wide by 8-foot deep screened porch and is devoid of windows. So the staff recommendation is to recommends approval subject to the final site plan meeting city engineering standards, a window being added to the rear elevation, and a final site plan to include a tree in the front and backyards, and all elevations to use the same siding material as shown.
Thank you for that. This is the same applicant, so we don't have anyone present for discussion. So let's have the board decide how we want to proceed.
This one has a lot of questions too, just with materiality. It says something about hardy siding, but then it also says vinyl siding. I'd have questions about the floor plan too. You have to go outside in the screen porch to get to the water heater and furnace that's outside. It looks like just some odd stuff has it been added ad hoc, and the front elevation is, I don't think, acceptable. They're showing just 6x6 posts, so then I'd want to say, like, is it going to get cladded or is it pressure treated? There's no handrail shown to get up onto it. There's no guardrail. So there's just, I mean, 10-12 honestly is an odd proportion for the top of it too. For the roof, I mean.
If they're going to do a 10-12 roof, they could have a 12-foot to 18-foot wide second floor.
Yeah, put somebody up there.
There's a great place for the stair just inside the front door. I mean, of course, we're not the designers.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, in disregarding the siding, you're correct. There is different type of siding on the front as in the rest of the elevation. So that was the last staff recommendation, is that they just pick one and go with it.
Okay.
Does anyone want to make a motion?
I mean, I'd motion to postpone this as well, just so that we can have the conversation about it, because it's, I think a few questions and a quick discussion could get this where it needs to be, and then it could be approved. Because I appreciate it's got a brick base. There's things about it that are fine.
I agree. I have a couple
30
questions,
days.
so I'll second. Oh, you didn't finish your motion.
Matthew reminded me for 30 days.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone for 30 days and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next up, we have 3 that are intentionally postponed. So I think what we can do is just read their case numbers and decide to vote on the postponement. Yep. Is that right? Okay. So I'll just read all of these. 3343 Divide Street, which is case number 2D25IH. The next one is 3335 Divide Street, case number 2G25IH. And the last one is 3339 Divide Street, 2H25IH.
I would like to make a motion to postpone per staff recommendation
Can
We have a
get
motion?
for 30 days.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone per staff recommendation, a postponement of 30 days, and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that one carries. We have one more. 816 East Churchwell Avenue, case number 2J25IH. Is it a postponement?
Well, staff is recommending postponement, but I don't think the applicant, oh, he is present, okay. I'll go through this.
Okay.
Okay. Let me just go to the. Okay. So this is a new primary structure fronting East Churchwell Avenue, two-story residence featuring a side gable roof, 712 pitch, clad in asphalt shingles, an exterior of horizontal vinyl lap siding with trim, a black foundation clad in stucco. The house is 18 feet 10 inches wide by 44 feet deep, and is proposed to be set 20 feet from the front property line. It features a full-length 7-foot 4-inch deep front porch recessed under the shed roof and supported by three 6-inch square columns made from pressure-treated wood. Parking is a 22 by 25 deep concrete pad and is accessed from the alley. The south facade features two bays with paired 4/1 single hung windows in the left bay and a quarter light door with a transom on the right bay. The second story features a shed roof dormer with 3 transom windows that project from the primary roof line. The left elevation features 3 4/1 single hung windows on the first floor and 2 windows on the second story. The right elevation features 2 4/1 single hung windows and a transom window on the first story and 2 transom windows on the second story. The rear elevation features a second entrance with a full light door recessed under a primary roof line and a pair of 4/1 single hung windows. The house is proposed to be 20 feet from the front property line. The average front setback of the block face is 29 feet, with the adjacent house at 30 feet. The site plan includes a walkway from the front porch of the street. The block to receive new construction is characterized by minimal traditional houses and infill construction. The 18-foot 10-inch wide facade is not proportionate to other houses on the block, which range between approximately 26 feet and 38 feet wide, or the dimensions of the lot. Corner, side, and rear setback requirements would allow for a house with a wider facade that would better fit the context and dimensions of the lot. The plan has been approved by the board previously, but for a 30-foot wide lot where the facade was not proportionally narrow. Parking, I think, is that all right? Mm-hmm. Parking is on 11-foot wide by 22 feet deep diagonal concrete pad that is accessed from the alley, which meets design guidelines. The final site plan needs to meet city engineering standards. The 2-bay facade is significantly more narrow than the older houses on the street by at least 6 to 8 feet. The height is of similar scale in the context. The house features full-length 7-foot 4-inch deep porch recessed under a shed roof and supported by 3 6-inch square columns made from pressure-treated wood. The guidelines typically recommend porches of at least 8 feet deep. This porch is proportional to the house. The 4/1 single hung windows and the quarter light door fit the context. All elevations feature a sufficiently ratio of solid to void. The 712 pitch roof matches the neighborhood context and the design features from the shed dormer, overhangs, and eaves and trim. the asphalt shingles, lap siding, and stucco coated block foundation all meet the design guidelines. The siding should be traditional clapboard style siding instead of a Dutch lap or flush panel siding. The final site plan should include one tree in the front and backyards. So as we've already alluded, staff is recommending postponement to allow the applicant to select a plan which meets the guidelines, encouraging front elevations to be similar in scale and width to the original houses on the block.
Thank you for that, Mike. Is the applicant present online? Can you give us your name and address, please? Hello. Can you tell if he's still there? Sorry, we can't hear you.
Are you able to hear me now?
There you are.
Yes.
Hi.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Yes, my name is Spencer Stanley, and 816 East Churchwell Avenue is the address.
Great. Thank you. Do you have anything to add to Mike's comments?
Yeah, I guess the reason I chose the narrower floor plan was mainly because, of course, there's a 12-foot setback on that corner where it's a corner lot, and then mainly just trying to keep it off of the other house, which is, I think, decently close to that lot line. That was my intention. However, I do kind of see where the board is coming from on that, and I wanted to propose. I have this exact same house, like as far as the external appearance, just with a wider floor plan, and I would be willing to use that. It's 28 feet wide, and it's 36 feet deep instead of this. And there's another column on the front porch just to bridge the gap in the additional width. But otherwise, the plan is externally, the appearance is almost the exact same. And if we need to postpone, I understand, but that would be ideal if we could do that, the 28-foot plan.
That sounds like a promising solution, but I don't think we can approve something that we don't see in the application here today.
Okay.
I would probably shy away from it on significant change like that. I guess I have a question for the applicant regarding the slope of the property, and have you kind of determined the foundation height? I mean, with a deep house like this on a lot that's rising up from the road, the front of the house could have a fairly substantial foundation. Have you studied that yet?
Yeah, I agree. I'm expecting to be probably 4 to 5 block out of the ground is what I'm looking at right now. But of course, with the change in floor plan, the house that I'm looking at now is 36 feet deep, and so that'll be I won't have to have it. I won't go into the back section as much. I don't think.
I think it
And
would
the
be.
lot.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say the slope isn't. I mean, I've walked it several times and mapped it out and stuff, and I don't see a huge issue with that.
Mike, if you go further up on this street view right here, so further up, yeah, that way. How are you addressing that driveway? Is that through the property, or is that going to cease to exist?
Oh yeah, that'll cease to exist.
Oh, that will. You said that will cease to exist.
Yes. The one that's leading to the other house.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, that has been or it will be taken out.
Gorilla curb cut.
I think the most efficient path forward is to resubmit with the house that you have in mind and make sure that the foundation reflects the actual condition of the site so that we can see how that's resolved.
Okay.
And do you know, I mean, this is just kind of to help the board understand how, but when they get the revised plans, you know, this large tree that's in the rear yard and, you know, if you can note whether or not that's going to be retained or if it has to come down, it might be helpful. Just
Sure. It should be retained based on what the lines I've pulled and tape measure and stuff before. But yeah, I can note that on the plans.
Great.
Any other comments?
I would make a motion to postpone for 30 days.
I second.
We have a motion to postpone for 30 days and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. We're going to adjourn. Thanks, everybody.